All right, you guys. So I'm going to give you a little lesson on moles, okay? And hopefully this works and we can all see it. So moles, all right? What are we going to start with first? Well, let's start with something like oxygen. And if we found oxygen on the periodic chart, we would see its symbol, and we would see that it has the atomic number of 8 and the atomic mass of 15.999, okay? And from that, we know that we can figure out the protons, electrons, and neutrons, because protons would be 8, so would electrons be 8, and neutrons, we would just round the 15.99 to 16 and subtract, and so neutrons would be 8. We could also draw the Bohr model, and from trends on the periodic table, we would know that oxygen has a -2 valence. For instance, oxygen has a -2 valence, right? We know its Bohr model would have 8 protons, 8 neutrons inside the nucleus. Then in the first energy level, we would have 1, 2 electrons. And the second energy level, we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with like 2 empty seats, so to speak. Okay. But what about moles? What is this moles stuff? Well, moles is a way of actually determining amounts, okay? Whether it be volume, the amount of volume, the amount of mass, or the amount of particles, okay? And Avogadro came up with the mole, and it's a number, kind of like a dozen is 12. Well, a mole is 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. Now, something I want to mention, see this 15.99? We say that that is the atomic term is kind of, or that terminology is kind of deceiving, because do you really think an atom of oxygen weighs 15.999 grams? Okay, an atom is such a tiny, tiny thing. So all these atomic masses, it'd almost be better if we said it was the atomic molar mass, because that's exactly what it is. It's the mass of 1 mole of these oxygen atoms, and that would be 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd oxygen atoms, which is an awful lot. Okay, so the atomic mass for any atom is real easy. You just have to look at a periodic chart, right? And look at any of the atomic masses, and that's how much a mole of that element weighs, okay? So that's atomic mass, and we use atomic masses when we're talking about atoms or elements, okay? But what about when we want to talk about, and we'll give one more example here. Let's do hydrogen. Okay, so hydrogen, if you look up hydrogen, it has 1 for its atomic number, and it has 1.007 for its atomic mass. So again, does an atom of hydrogen weigh 1.007 grams? No, a mole of hydrogen weighs 1.007. So that means 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd hydrogen atoms weigh 1.007 grams. Okay, that's an atomic mass. So atomic mass is used for like elements. For elements. But what about when we have a compound like water? Okay, what about water? Water is a compound, okay? So when we use a water molecule, we can't call it an atomic mass. We're going to call it, like we would want to say, molecular mass, because it's a molecule, not an atom, but not all compounds are molecules. Should we call it compound mass? Well, I don't know why they didn't call it that, but what they did call it is they decided to call it a formula mass, because all these compounds have formulas. So formula mass. Now, what is a formula mass? Well, you just have to add up the atomic masses, but you also have to pay attention to how many hydrogens you have, how many oxygens you have. So let's look at this. How would we figure out the formula mass, or the mass of 1 mole of water molecules? Okay, so this time we're saying we have a mole of water molecules, okay, or mole of water formulas, okay? So what do? Well, we say we have 2 times that 1.0, and I'm rounding for the mass, plus 1 times, and I'm rounding the mass for oxygen, 16.0, okay, which equals a total of 18.0 grams. So that is what we call the formula mass for water. And that's like what 1 mole of water weighs. Okay, so you're going to need to remember how to calculate these formula masses. Okay, and also if I just ask you the atomic mass. All right, so a little review here, and I always like to say 1 mole. With 1 mole, why is 1 mole good? We can go to so many quantities from 1 mole. Okay, we can go to a volume. If it is a gas, and that gas is at certain conditions, we call it standard temperature and pressure, STP. We're not going to use that in biology so much. Okay, we can take 1 mole to the number of particles. Right? So like if that 1 mole is of an element, then those particles are the number of atoms. And that's that number I kept throwing out to you. Anybody remember what it was? Good. Okay, 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd things, right? That's a big number, okay? And you're not going to use that so much. But what we are going to use in biology is how we can convert mole to mass, okay? And remember, if we're talking about a mole of an element, that mass is going to be atomic mass, okay? And all you have to do is look it up on the periodic chart. And if we're talking about a mole of a compound, then we're going to talk about the formula mass. And again, it almost be great to say atomic molar mass, formula molar mass, because it is the mass of a mole. So for our final thing here, I want to scoot this up a little bit, and I want to do one example of you. Let's see if you can calculate what 1 mole of good old C6H12O6 weighs. Okay, what does 1 mole of C6H12O6? Okay, so we'll give you a few seconds because we got to think like Mr. Bush and we got to like calculate fast in our heads. Okay, but how would you do this? Okay, and again, you need a periodic table. You need to look up these values, but I'm going to tell you the value of carbon is 12.0. And I always round it to like 1 place after the decimal. Okay, hydrogen we know before it's 1.0, and oxygen was 16.0 rounded. But notice the 6 and the 12 and the 6. So we got to go 6 times the 12 plus 12 times the 1 plus 6 times the 16 to get, and we get 180 grams, 180.0 grams of C6H12O6 a little bit later. So I hope this helps on like how to calculate molar masses. We're going to be doing this a lot when we have to figure out formulas or figure out solutions, in our class. So don't forget how to calculate masses. Remember, again, if I ask you to calculate a molar mass and it's an element, okay, so remember, atomic mass is for elements, okay, that you just have to look up on a periodic chart. But if it's formula mass, that's a compound, and you're going to have to add it up, okay? Add it up, and don't forget to multiply by the little subscripts there, okay? And that's it. And let me stop sharing this with you and stop recording. So let's see if we can do this. Mrs. Horner, stop recording, and let's hope that this video turned out. Stop recording.